Hi everyone, and welcome to the next chapter of Goodbye to Guilt, and it is called Ego's Attraction to Guilt. To understand it, we have to discuss the nature of perceptions, okay? This is how we see the world around us. Everyone sees the world differently, depending on our own individual needs and wishes, our past experiences and our present beliefs. We think that perceptions are photographs of things outside ourselves taken by a camera, but what they really are our projections of our thoughts that originate in our own mind. So Gerald explains we always look in before we look out. So what we see is in our own state of mind is reflected outward. Our perception is our choice. He goes on to explain that actually if 10 people saw an accident, it would be unusual for any 2 people to agree on the details. So what we believe is the truth is simply our interpretation of it. So many of our difficulties and disagreements we have with other people are highly individualised nature of our perceptions. Well, as we go through life, we actually can't go through life without making decisions. And Gerald explains in order to do so, we have to listen to 2 voices: the ego, which is a changeable thoughts, and the voice of love. So our ego mind has a continuum of mental pictures based on perceptions of guilt and fear, and this determines what we think we want in the present moment. So if we're in the present moment and the voice says, I want what I want right now, the ego will be in the background kicking in saying, hey, watch out, you're vulnerable, and all those hurtful experiences of the past will be going to be repeated. So when we listen to our ego, our decisions are frequently founded by judgments and interpretations of past experiences. To survive, the ego will tell us we must look for guilt in others or in ourselves, and this focus on who is guilty or innocent becomes our basis for the decision making. I can actually relate to this with certain things in my life, where I feel when I'm actually going through this book, it's actually highlighting a few things what I need to work on. The attraction of the ego to guilt produces a fear of love, since it's impossible to feel love and fear at the same time. If we continue to use guilt as a basis to make decisions, it leaves us feeling more fearful and devoid of love. When our ego mind is in automatic pilot, it constantly superimposes the past over the present, so which is no wonder our problems seem to defy lasting solutions. So projection. When we perceive others through the eyes of guilt, we are likely to engage in projection. Projection's the mechanism by which we deny responsibility for and externalise a thought or a feeling we're experiencing, such as guilt by holding someone else responsible. Now, Gerald goes on to say that we believe if only they had behaved differently, then we would not experience the difficulties we are having. So he uses an example about his 2 sons when they were at grammar school, and he used to try with no success to make them feel guilty about their untidy rooms in an attempt to make them change their behaviour. He says what he denied was his own guilt of having a messy office by projecting the problem onto his boys. If we project our problems onto others, it doesn't solve the problem, it simply recycles the guilt. So what is guilt? Guilt's a feeling of self-condemnation, that we do something we think is wrong. The underlying source of basic guilt is a belief that we have sinned, fear we will be punished. Guilt and fear cannot coexist with love. Okay, so if you're coming from a world of love, the guilt and the fear cannot kick in. Okay, they don't work together. If we hold on to the guilt, we will attack ourselves, which becomes expressed as symptoms of depression or physical illness. Holding on to the guilt is the ego's way of keeping the past. So then we have the game of guilty and innocent. Okay, so Gerald believes that this takes place in a lot of marriages and relationships and friendships, and how it happens is one person will throw a potato of guilt at someone, either a partner, spouse, a friend, and the other person may catch it, hold on to it, or they may throw it back, playing the guilty or innocent game. But when we decide not to play this game anymore of guilty and innocent, and we just come from a place of love, then it changes the dynamics of the relationship. So what are the effects of guilt? Now this is interesting because it actually goes back into a time when he actually had a conversation with a friend, and for 24 hours later he felt overwhelmed with the guilt, what he'd actually been discussing. And that's what I'm finding whilst I'm going through the book. It's bringing up things which I thought I had actually dealt with, and it's bringing up those emotions and those feelings. So holding on to guilt is guaranteed to make us feel under attack, justify our feelings of anger towards ourselves or towards someone else, destroy our self-esteem and confidence, makes us depressed, hollow and empty, destroys our sense of peace, and it makes us feel unloved. So I can actually relate to quite a few of those which are actually coming up, and I'm having to do extra tapping sessions to try and relieve the guilt from it, because of the things this book is bringing up. It is really interesting when you start looking at it and reading more deeply into it. Guilt's a self-made poison. It is the effective tool the ego has for ensuring that we will remain hopelessly in the past and not recognise opportunities. One known antidote for guilt is complete forgiveness. We believe if only they would behave differently, when we would not. Oh no, I've gone on to that bit. Sorry, why have I gone on to that bit? Okay. So the ego looks on forgiveness with a split mind. It counsels us to forgive but not forget. It continues to justify making condemning judgments for survival, depending on believing the reality of guilt rather than forgiveness. The ego will say, I can forgive you because I'm superior to you. Therefore, I will sit on my anger and I will repress it rather than be consciously aware of it, of my desire to kill you, which is what you really deserve. This is not very genuine forgiveness. And it reinforces the guilt because of the double message that comes into emphasis, the unhealed separation of innocence and guilt. Gerald goes on to explain about dreams, and that dreams can show a sign of forgiveness. And he explains about a dream that he actually had, and he'd done a lot of work on letting go of guilty feelings. And he was a giant in a football uniform, and he was caked in mud. And he was then in a dark shower, and as he showered, the mud dissolved, and he became smaller and smaller. The smaller he became, the more light that came into his room, and he finally dissolved into nothing. So the room was eventually filled with a bright white light, which was obviously the love. So this is what Gerald's association to the dream was. He had worked on himself, letting go of the guilt. The mud represented the guilt, the water was the forgiveness, and the light represented the love that he had. He says the only way he can be truly peaceful and happy is to stay in the present moment, make every thought and breath of one of forgiveness. The key to see the world differently to see the world differently by being vigilant of forgiveness is the key to happiness, which offers us everything we need. So Gerald says, letting go of the past corrects our misperceptions and stops the endless recycling of guilt. So do you have anything in the past that you need to forgive so that you can actually be free of the guilt and the fear? With that video, I hope you found it useful, and I will be back tomorrow with the next chapter. I'll see you all soon. Take care.